Welcome to the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Heidy De La Cruz, and I am on the mission to change the narrative of immigration, one immigrant story at a time. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Heidy De La Cruz, and today I have Miss Irma. And funny thing that we were literally just talking about before I hit record was about the pronunciation of her name, because you guys know my parents are from the Dominican Republic. I'm Hispanic, so I tend to say names in Spanish. So to me, it would be Irma. But you told me the actual pronunciation, which is a little bit different. So let's get into that.
Heidi, hello. I'm so happy to be here with you on your show, and thank you for having me. I do appreciate it so much to talk about what immigration means to people and to the world in general. My name in Afrikaans is pronounced Irma. But being in North America, people tend to say Irma. They kind of soften that sound, right?
Yeah.
And of course, with Hispanic people and even German people, it's Irma. So
even German.
Do not care. Yes.
Nice. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I find that very interesting, but I definitely am very respectful of people's names because I understand, the importance and culturally and everything. So I definitely try to pronounce it the correct way, or I'll ask like, hey, what's the pronunciation? And I've also like to ask like if there's a meaning behind the name. So do you have a meaning behind your name or no?
I have no idea.
Okay. No worries. All right. So let's get started. Let's do a little introduction. So who you are, what you do, and then we can get right into how was life living in South Africa.
Thank you for that opportunity. I am not only a speaker, but I managed to do my TEDx speech last year. I'm very excited. I have written a few books. I mainly focus on being an immigrant success advocate, meaning that I work with legal immigrants. I talk to large companies about the bottom line that legal immigrants can mean for their bank accounts, because we have different ideas, different experiences, and our innovations can actually change the way they do things. And because of that, I'm also working with youth. I work with youth leadership as well as coaching youth. And I have a little feather in my cap. I managed to get a young teenager to be speaking on a TEDx stage beginning next year. So I'm very excited for that.
Wow. Congratulations on that. And I will definitely link your TEDx talk in the show notes so people can check that out.
Thank you. Living in South Africa, I grew up to a different idea of what the world might have thought. We did have curfews. We were supposed to be in our homes at certain times. Of course, people think it was only different tribes that had to do that, but it was everyone in the country. So I grew up with that. I grew up with a lot of violence. I managed to deal with it. And then I slept with a gun underneath my pillow. I looked over my shoulder everywhere I went, and I will never forget the day I had to go get my visa at the US consulate. I put all the money to pay for my visa, I put it on my person, and I wore the oldest clothes possible. I wore no jewelry. I tried to look really bedraggled, and I was scared the whole time I walked from my car to the US consulate, and this was in Durban, South Africa. And I will never forget when I told the security guard, I need to take the money out. He kind of looked funny at me because where would I pack the money? But that was one of the issues, and at the end of the day, there was an incident that caused me to say, I'm done. No more of this, because I was a target.
Mm.
I'm the minority. I'm Caucasian, female. And there was just this, people say that there was racism, but the reverse racism was worse. The fact that I dared to be in that country, and I never, never in my wildest dreams would have thought to be mean to anyone, to hurt anyone. But just the fact that I existed made me a target. And then my daughter, she was in daycare. She was just over a year at the time. And her daycare was attacked in broad daylight
Mm.
because daycares and retirement homes were easy targets to attack. And those days, the owners wouldn't take credit cards. They used checks and cash to pay
Mm.
for the daycare. And it was only a certain age group as well. So the day it happened, the three assailants walked into the daycare wearing suits, hiding the AK-47s underneath their suit jackets.
Mm.
And they held the babies hostage. They held the caregivers hostage. And by the time I got the phone call, I was at work at the time, the police had already been involved. But that was probably one of the scariest moments in my life, to be able to have to drive from Durban to this town where it happened. And Heidi, on the left of me on the highway was the Indian Ocean. And I remember it was a beautiful day, gorgeous day. I could see the blue sky, and I looked to my left, and there were dolphins
Mm.
playing in the ocean in the distance. And I noticed all these things. And I still remember that I didn't have cash on me to bribe the police if they had pulled me over. I didn't have the cash on me. I had to make sure I stuck to the speed. I had to make sure not to draw any attention to me, and just hope and pray that I managed to get there. And when I got there, it was chaos. And I thought, I cannot do this anymore. I cannot. And that's the day I decided I'm leaving.
Wow, I am so sorry for all of that. Oh, so when you decided that you were leaving, was the United States always a first choice for you?
I didn't care where I would go. I wanted to leave.
Yeah.
And then once I put it out there, we had friends in Houston, and they contacted us and said, you know what? Come here. There's a large group of people from South Africa. There's a lot of work. And we both in engineering, my husband and I. And he said, come to Houston. And so we did. And we moved to Houston. And it was very different. The culture,
Yeah.
the language, it was crazy. The accent, oh my goodness. It was quite the change. I mentioned it in my TED talk, but we arrived there. It was Christmas season, and everywhere were decorations outside, and I've never seen something like that, because in South Africa, anything that was put outside was stolen. It was taken. So no one ever did that. We were more concerned about surviving and staying alive than what we were decorating our home. So that was, whoa! I was like a child in Wonderland. I
Yeah.
couldn't believe this. And then, of course, the accent. And the Houstonians speak with a drawl. They have this potato in their mouths that, coming from a different accent and different culture, is hard to understand. And it was so difficult for me. I had to ask my managers to please write down what they wanted me to do. And sometimes they were like, does she know what she's talking about? But most of all, everyone was very good natured and they helped me. They helped both of us to fit in to our new environment. And that was absolutely fantastic. It was a warm, welcoming environment. And Heidi, we were free. I've never seen people walk their families. I'll never forget my first sight of a family. The baby in the stroller, another toddler on the shoulders of the dad. They had a dog with them and they were just strolling. I wasn't used to that. I couldn't. I was in shock that that is actually possible to be able to do that. And so it brings me to, when we grow up, doesn't matter where we are, the analogy of the frog in the cool water, and you probably have heard of it, is as the frog is in the cool water, it's happy. And you start adding warmer water to this frog, to the water, it's happy because it's so gradual that it's happy. And then eventually you can put it on the stove and it's boiling and it's still happy because it happens so with time and it got used to it. And I think that's the same if you live in a different country where freedom is a rare commodity. It's not something that you're used to. You're so used to looking over your shoulder. You don't think there's another way of living.
Yeah.
And so that was my experience.
And so can you tell us about the process of coming over to the US?
First of all, we had to, of course, get all the documents in order. And being from South Africa, they wanted us to go for all kinds of shots and injections and pestilence removals from our body and whatever else they wanted us to do. But the visa itself to get to the US wasn't difficult. It was they sent us the papers with all the documents, and it was a matter of going to the US consulate, pay your fees, and making sure that you had that. The other thing were our passports. I've never had a passport before, so I had to apply for one. It was quite the process because, you go through the usual police clearance and security this and background this. And then I had to get one for my daughter as well. And that was another one because now we had to get little pictures taken, the passport pictures. It was all a strange concept. And we had to sell everything. We sold everything. We left with 2 suitcases each. I took my daughter's teddies. I packed that in her suitcases. And of course, extra mom stuff in her suitcases because she was little. She didn't need some. But that's what we left with. 2 suitcases each. That's how we started our new lives. We got rid of everything. I had beautiful furniture, and just beautiful things. And I gave it away and I sold a lot of it, but I gave most of it away because at the end of the day, it's only things. Only stuff. And starting over and giving my daughter a safe life and environment, that was my priority. I was attacked, I was accosted and my family got attacked. We've heard horror stories. Things got stolen, but you don't touch my little girl, you don't touch my child. That to me was, I'm done. I'm not going to sit through this. And many people called us cowards.
Have you been thinking about starting your very own podcast? Well, I created a podcast course to help you launch your podcast without feeling overwhelmed and with simplicity. Okay. So it is a 6-week podcast course. Each video is less than 15 minutes long, so it doesn't take that much time to get through. And it breaks down the steps that you need to launch your podcast. Again, 6 weeks or less. So you can do it faster than 6 weeks, or you can take longer than 6 weeks. It's all up to you. You do it at your pace. And you will get lifetime access to this course. In addition to the 6 modules or the 6 videos, you also get videos about editing. You'll also get the podcast digital planner, which helps you create your content. It helps you with the episode outline. It helps you with the show notes outline. It helps you stay on track with the podcast cycle checklist. It has the guest intake form and also a Google Sheet episode organizer to make sure that you are organized and set up from the jump to be able to plan out your content, organize your episodes, because that is key to long-term podcasting, right? You'll also get 3 exclusive interviews with leading podcasters who are killing it in the industry. And in addition to all of that, you will also get the podcast workbook, like how to launch a podcast workbook that goes along with each module. So you can watch the videos and then also follow along with the workbook. All of that is included in the course. If you are interested, head over to my Stand store. The link is in the show notes and the show description, so you can sign up for the course. And there's also a referral program included. If you refer someone to me to launch their podcast and they sign up for the course, I will give you $50. That's right. You will receive $50 if the person you referred does sign up for the podcast course. So all the information is in my Stand store. If you have any specific questions, you can always email me at Heidi@HeidiDeLaCruz.com, and let's get your podcast launched.
For leaving the country, for not staying behind and facing whatever was coming. To me, it wasn't an option. And even going through having to sell everything and having to obtain all the legal documents and going to lawyers and making sure everything is in order, that was worth it. And I'm a logical person. I'm a Virgo, so I'm very logical. And I had everything. Step 1, step 2, step 3. I love my lists. And I had everything in place. So when we got to customs in the US, everything was ready so that we could just go and live a new life.
So are you still in Texas?
No, we left Texas. Oh, my second daughter was born in the US.
Okay.
So we've always planned to go back to the US eventually. What happened was we were in immigration and working with a lawyer for our green cards, and we were in labor certification, but time dragged so much. We were told that we had to leave the country for 1 year and then go back, and we could continue our process. And so we were ready. We were going to go back to the US, and then the agent we worked through didn't reply to our lawyer or immigration. And they closed our file at the time. So we thought we will stay. We are currently in Canada. We thought we'll stay in Canada, and then eventually, because my daughter said as well she would like to go back to where she was born. And then eventually we decided we will probably go back there.
So you guys had to go to Canada for a year and then come back to the US?
Mm-hmm. Yes. They wanted, because we had our visas extended for the full term. We had the full first term, and then the second term it was fully extended, and then we were running out of time.
So you guys came with a visiting visa, visitor's
Yes,
visa.
with work visas. We came with
Oh,
work.
work visas. Okay.
Yes, we
Okay.
came with work visas. Yeah. So unfortunately, um, legalities prevented us from going all the way.
Okay. And so from Texas, you guys from Texas then to Canada, and then once you guys came back to the US, you guys went back to Texas?
No, we are still currently in Canada.
Oh,
We,
okay.
yeah, we were 4 years that we lived in the US, and then we had to go to Canada, which wasn't in the plan, but that's the way life gave us, the road life took us on.
Yes. So
Um,
how's it been living in Canada compared to the US and South Africa?
I think Canada is very similar to the US. The the way people live, the big difference, Houston had all the critters and snakes and creepy crawlies and ugly creatures. Canada has the cold. Oh my goodness, Heidi, it gets cold. It gets to minus gazillion. And funny story, in the US, we knew about air conditioning, right? So we used our air conditioning when it was hot. We managed it. We were busy. It was very similar to where we lived on the East Coast in South Africa. A little bit warmer, but so we could manage. We could go out and we could enjoy life. Cold weather, we didn't know there's
Hmm.
such a thing as central heating. We didn't. So we had a Canadian babysitter, and she would come in early in the mornings because we worked at oil and gas at a new construction. And one morning she walked in, and I said to my husband, I don't know how we're going to survive. This is so cold. I don't know if I can survive this weather. And the babysitter walked in, and her kids were all grown one morning, and she said, why is your house so cold? I said to her, how long does it take for you guys to get used to this cold? How do you live with this? And she looked at me and said, let me show you. She turned on the furnace.
Oh my
Like that thing
goodness.
is a furnace. I looked at it. The blast of warm air was the most welcome feeling I've had in a long, long time.
Yes.
I didn't know.
Oh
I
my goodness. Well, I mean, it's just little things like that that are different from your home country that, you just have to learn when you're in a new one. Oh my goodness. So before moving to the US, you guys fled. So, it's probably not a lot of time to do research or anything, but just like things that you had heard about the US or, anything like that. Did you have like any expectations of like how the US was going to be versus like the reality or not really?
From what we've heard, the US was the Wild West, and
Oh, wow.
people were running around in the streets with guns. There was no development. And when people said, you can come and work here, it's actually similar to South Africa before the country was in disrepair as it is at the moment. And we were, no, the US, we heard there's wild animals roaming and people walking with these huge guns and, chewing these tobaccos, and there's war everywhere. And that's why when I landed, saw the Christmas decorations, how nice the people were, how accommodating the people were, how accepting of us, that we just another family going to make a new life in the US, and everything was big. I have never in my life seen such big stores. I would walk in there and just go, we had to get bedding, for example. And you go, how do you choose? It was overwhelming because of the choices and the foods. The foods, they were things we missed that we couldn't find. And we asked around a lot, and some of the words were different. But it was fun, Heidi. It was fun learning to be part of a new culture. It was fun to try out new things. And they were still foods that we made at home that were similar to what we were used to. But I remember my first crawfish party. We were invited to, and it was probably around fall, and they invited us, and it was going to be outside. So it was beautiful, beautiful weather. And there were these strong lights, these colorful lights, and music playing, and kids running around, and the smells of the food, and these big pots. I've never seen such big pots in my life. And then when we were ready to eat, they put newspaper over the trestle tables, and they poured all the food on top of the tables like that. And it was such a magnificent experience. I will never forget that. It was absolutely a blast.
Oh my goodness. All right. So now I would love to get into the work that you do. So, how did this come about?
Funny you ask. The reason I started doing this is because of my second daughter.
Mm.
I already mentioned she was born in the US, and actually, I told her story last week in San Diego at a speak event, and it was the first time I talked about it in public.
Mm.
Our culture is such, and I listened to your podcast when you talked about the way you grew up. So
Oh.
our culture was such, a child had to be obedient. You couldn't be argumentative. You couldn't be disrespectful. And that's the way I raised my kids.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, my second daughter, she is extremely talented. She's a she's a tattoo artist at the moment, and there's a amazing story around that. But she was quiet and just gentle and kind and very respectful, and she was an easy target for bullies.
Mm.
She, different culture. My older daughter, there's 6 years difference between the two. She tried to protect her, but it's tough because they different schools,
Yeah.
elementary, middle. Anyway, and the bullying got so severe, we almost lost her, and it was by grace that we found that out.
Mm.
And she was so severely bullied that she had written a letter. And the only thing that held her back, Heidi, was me, my
Oh.
love. She knew I would be devastated. And, it's funny. When she was born, I was worried I wouldn't be able to love her as much as my firstborn because I almost lost my firstborn, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't the case. We, as moms, we always have more love. And the day we discovered that was the day that my life changed.
Mm.
Because she knew the why, the where, the how, and she didn't know the when.
Mm.
So we moved on from there. It was tough. It was awful.
Yeah.
The next few years were awful. But we started inviting friends over the ones who protected her while she was being bullied, the ones who didn't quite fit into the school environment because of their circumstances. And sometimes we had up to 30 kids, and we created a fire pit. So the kids would come and they would tell us their stories. And they then inspired me to start speaking at schools and then community events.
Hi, Heidi here. Thank you so much for listening and supporting my podcast, but most importantly, the mission. If you would like to further support this podcast, there are a few ways you can do that. You can sign up for the newsletter. You'll receive the episodes straight to your inbox every time they drop. The link is in the show notes and the show description. You can subscribe to the podcast YouTube channel. And lastly, you can donate money. That link is also in the show notes and show description. If you would like to sponsor an episode or promote your business on this show, send me an email at Heidi@HeidiDeLaCruz.com. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the episode.
And then eventually started on stages. And you mentioned in your podcast how you had to translate for your dad. And it was interesting because that is what I found, is that immigrant kids, the parents are so overwhelmed. They ask the kids to help them adapt in the social-cultural environment that they are now in, because they want to fit into the new country. They want to prove they fit, they belong. They want to show they're prepared to work, prepared to pay their taxes, prepared to be lawful citizens. So, and that is when I discovered that, and I started talking about legal immigration. And I've been talking about this for probably quite a few years. I've been working with kids 10 years, probably longer than 10 years. And then last year was my opportunity to really enforce it when I had my TEDx talk. And I talked about how you survive when you're a legal immigrant in a new country. And it was my opportunity to explain to the world that legal immigrants are of the innovators in this world that are making huge strides and changes. And I know that sometimes they are controversial. If you look at Elon Musk, he was born in South Africa, he went to Canada, and now is US. He is a genius. He's an innovator. You look at other companies like Google and eBay and Yahoo and Intel. They have all been sponsored by venture capital investors, and they've all been done. 25% of all these investors and all these innovators have been immigrants. So to me, it shows that as legal immigrants, because we come from countries where we did things different, and sometimes our ideas can really help the companies we go to. So that is what I talk about. I talk about how we find your youth entrepreneurs and from legal immigrants. You know, I talk about how wherever you go, you see that we want to help others. We go out of our way to prove to our host countries that we do belong. We deserve to live in this current country where we're at. And many people who grew up in the countries, they don't understand that. They don't understand that you come from a different culture where you look at things in a wider spectrum. You can look at things from a different distance, whereas growing up in the same country, you don't always see what's right before you, in front of your eyes. So I have discovered that as well. And that is why I focus on the leadership aspect and helping people understand when you learn how to speak properly, you can bring your message across. So I'm helping people as well to be leaders, to embrace that leadership within them. Because if you immigrated to leave your country and you went through legal channels and you paid thousands and thousands of dollars to be able to work through all these legalities, then you are a leader. You are a leader when you do that. And people don't always realize that. They don't always see themselves as leaders. They think, but I'm just an immigrant. People look down on me. And I think we need to move past that. It's easy to have a chip on your shoulder. It's easy to play woe me. It's harder to put yourself out there, even if you have an accent, and to say, I am here. I'm here to serve you. I'm here to help your country become better because I paid to be here. So that's what I work on. That's what I do.
Thank you so much for explaining that. And I appreciate the work that you are doing with providing a voice and advocating and everything. But I do want to ask, why state legal immigration versus just immigration or immigrants? Why state legal immigrants versus just immigrants themselves?
Think that both in the US and Canada currently, there is this huge controversy around immigrants. And people have a very negative attitude towards anyone that did not, anyone that says they're immigrant. By explaining to people that legal immigrants pay to be in the current country. They work hard. They have to be vetted. They don't get given things. When I got to the US and to Canada, no one gave me anything. I had to work for everything I have. I had to pay to be able to be in the US and to be in Canada. I had to pay those legal fees. I had to find the lawyers. I had to jump through hoops to be in the new countries. And by putting a spotlight on that, it is my hope that people will change their minds and the way they look at immigration, that there is a positive, along with what the politicians are putting the countries through at the moment. And that is why I want people to understand there is a difference. And that when you see someone in front of you, just be gentle. Don't immediately think that they're there to be violent or to attack or to create acts that, will harm the general population. Perhaps ask around and see what kind of immigrant are they? Are they there through legal forms, through legal ways? That means that they want to be there. They want to fit in. And perhaps give them the opportunity to be friends with your children, to learn about their culture, and they will learn about your culture. I have friends from all over the world. My best friends are in the US and Canada, and there are some in Europe. So it's possible to be accepted as an immigrant when people understand that there is a difference and that we didn't just walk across the border.
So I understand trying to shed a light on that, and like, on immigration and everything, but saying legal immigrants when talking about immigration, it is divisive.
It is,
It
yeah.
is divisive. I understand that. And in my show, I have interviewed people who have crossed the border. I have interviewed undocumented immigrants. I have interviewed, and the reason why in my show I just call them all immigrants, I don't try to say legal immigration or non-legal immigration, is because each story has its own reason and its own, things that happen. So for example, there's one guest, I can't remember the number of her show right now, but I can definitely link it in the show notes. She came, her sister sponsored her and her family. So it was her mom, her dad, and her, right? Her sister was already in the US. And while they were going through their process of her sister sponsoring them, so this would be a legal route, right? That we're going on. Her particular process application did not go through. They don't know why. The immigration attorney was not able to explain the reason why. I don't know if it was the immigration or what it was, but unfortunately, she became undocumented. Although she came through the legal route to the United States. So you see what I'm saying? It's like there's a lot of there's a lot of nuances, there's a lot of complication and complexity that comes with the United States immigration process. So that's why I personally, and on my show, I tend to stay away from legal versus illegal. I mean, I don't even like calling people illegal immigrants because that's very dehumanizing. So I would just say like the proper term, undocumented, although we already know that, like, if you're, what is it? There's a thing on the documents calling alien resident or whatever. I don't even like saying that. But anyways, I rather say, undocumented versus legal versus illegal, because
like that.
There is a lot of there's a lot of things that can happen, which is also the reason why I started this podcast, is because of the negative narrative that there is about immigration currently, and unfortunately is done by both sides of the political platform. And I really feel like both sides use immigration for their political gains. But the thing is that, like, these are real people that are being affected. This is people with family and everything. So that's why I wanted to ask you about that, to get where your perspective was, because I do find it to be a little bit divisive. I'm sorry. I do understand, your point of view and that, but that's just my take on the whole saying legal versus.
And I like that because when I hear someone is an immigrant, I do exactly what I ask others to do that work with me, or the companies. Be mindful, be respectful. You don't know where they come from. And look what happened to us in the US, right? We lost our immigration application because of someone else that didn't reply. And that is the only reason we stayed in Canada. Because of that, it was someone else that did that to us. We didn't do it. We did everything right. We did everything we were supposed to do. So, and I've come across many, many immigrants, both students that were granted student visas. And I don't know if you heard, but now in Canada, there are hundreds of them who will not be granted permanent residency, like the green card, because of the numbers that are so overwhelming. So some of them are in their fourth years. They've finished their degrees. They can contribute to this country. And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with so many things, but I had to find a niche. I had to put my stake in the ground and say, this is what I will talk about. And that is why I'm doing what I'm doing, because that is what I can talk about.
Yeah.
I am not on anyone else's journey. This is my journey. This is where I have come from. This is how I perceive the world. And that is why I like your podcast, because I've listened to a few of the episodes.
Thank you.
I really like your kindness and your acceptance of anyone who has a story to tell, because we all have stories.
Yes.
And that is what makes us human.
Yes. And it's important to share our stories, one, when we're ready, not because anyone told us to or forced us to, but two, it's also important to share our stories. And then also it's important to listen to other people's stories, to listen with an open mind, to listen with compassion and empathy, because a lot of things happen that are out of our control, and they can put us in situations where we have to make decisions that we never thought we would have to make until we're in that position. So I appreciate the work that you're doing. I hope if it is in your guys' plan to be able to come back to the United States, that you guys are able to come back.
I travel there often. I spoke at Columbia University in April, and I spoke in San Diego last week. I'm going back there when my TEDx student will be speaking on stage, so I'll go back. It's actually the same stage, or it's also in San Diego, another stage where I had my TEDx talk. So she's going to be with the same organizer. And I have also traveled across Europe. I spoke at Oxford University last year as well.
Nice.
So I speak at universities because I feel, especially our students, that they can see there's different views.
Yeah.
And, it doesn't matter where you're from. At the end of the day, we're all connected by being human.
Yeah.
That's what connects us as a human race. And that is what's important. We need to learn to respect each other, to tolerate each other, to be able to live next to each other, and not to be so angry at the world for what some perceive. But, I was given this short stick, you were given the long stick. It's not fair. We are where we are, and we do the best we can.
Yeah.
In our lives.
Yes. All right. So, Irma, where can people connect with you if they want to follow your work, if they want to listen? I'm going to connect your TED Talk on the show notes, but where can people follow you and connect with you if they want to follow your work or work with you?
I am on LinkedIn. So I'm Irma Goosen on LinkedIn. I do like dealing with LinkedIn because it's more direct. It's more business related. I think when you go on other social medias, you tend to lose connection with people. Also on Facebook Messenger, they can contact me there. Through my website, irmagoosen.com, they can find me there. And of course, just Google me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story, your perspective, and the work that you're doing. I greatly appreciate you being here today.
Heidi, thank you for having me. It was enlightening to be able to chat with you about your work as well. And thank you for what you are doing. Thank you for shining a light on human beings. It is wonderful what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Mommy Podcast.